So at the time of recording, Junji Ito's Moan is the most recent short story collection from him. Whenever I heard of it initially, my first thought was of my cousin boywhimpering to deftones. Then my second thought was that Junji Ito's Moan is not a good title. It's very questionable. It's a questionable title for a book, and it's an even more questionable title for a video on YouTube. But nevertheless, here we are. For a while there, I really enjoyed talking about Junji Ito's works, mostly because they are very interesting. Even if they're not executed perfectly, they are still a lot of fun. And I have a lot of respect for Junji Ito as a creator just because of the fact that he just has made stuff for the past like 40 years or something. He's kind of like Stephen King or Trent Reznor in that regard. He's just someone who makes stuff repeatedly and just keeps on putting it out. And really, over the past 10 or 15 years, give or take, they've been publishing a lot of his work in English, which I think is awesome. And I've tried to read everything I can get my hands on from him, and I almost always enjoy it. But one thing I've noticed with the past few collections is that it seems like the well is running dry. I think I talked about this with the Tombs video I did about 2 years ago. Tombs at that time was the most recent short story collection, and I talked then about the idea that it felt like Junji Ito's best work had already been published in English and they were just kind of going for the rest of the stuff. And I think that's been true. Honestly, I don't think that most of the recent short story collections have been all that cool or interesting. Mimi's Tales of Terror I thought was utterly forgettable. Stitches I thought was kind of the same thing. The Liminal Zone Part 2 I thought was decent, but I didn't think it was interesting enough to do a video on. But like I said, I've still been reading these collections, even though I think they're imperfect, and Moan is the first one in a long while that I thought was really, really good. It's composed of 6 stories, and I thought all of them were good, if not great. And so to start off, we'll talk about the first one, Supernatural Transfer Student, which is a very funny title. So Supernatural Transfer Student is about a transfer student who comes over to a new school. This school has a supernatural club. It is for people who believe in the supernatural and who claim to have supernatural abilities, and so naturally the transfer student, the titular supernatural transfer student, joins this supernatural club. And you may be wondering, well, was the show Supernatural even out whenever this collection came out? The answer is yes, but they weren't discussing it. They were instead talking about strange happenings. So the first thing the supernatural student does is he kind of breaks the illusion that certain other students have mystical abilities. So for instance, one student tells the others that he has the ability to break the tips of spoons without even touching them, and then the supernatural transfer student immediately dispels that myth and shows how to do it. Apparently, if you just bend a spoon a lot and then you just press the handle really hard, then the tip of the spoon will break off. But basically, these students are out looking for supernatural places in their city, and anywhere the supernatural transfer student goes, he seems to be able to find one. So for instance, he finds a waterfall that no one else was able to find before, even though it was just kind of in the middle of the area. And at one point he finds a lake, even though there wasn't a lake in the area. And inside of the lake, there is a giant Godzilla dinosaur monster. And so in the story, there's some in-club fighting. One student kills the other. By the end of the story, the supernatural transfer student transfers to a completely different school, at which point the lake and the waterfall and the Godzilla and all of the weird stuff that the supernatural club supposedly found, all of it disappeared and went away just as the transfer student went away. And so of course the idea is that the supernatural transfer student was actually supernatural and was actually causing all of these strange phenomena. I really like the trope of a bunch of people pretending to have supernatural powers and then being outed by someone with real supernatural powers. I think it's a lot of fun, and it just reinforces my belief that it's better to just be what you are as opposed to trying to put on a false face and pretend to be someone else. Once again, be yourself is the best piece of advice you could ever give anyone. The second story in the collection is Moan, which has a picture of 2 young girls on the front page. So to start off the tale, there's a very fat, ugly boy with an ugly face, and just everything about him is ugly and disgusting, and he's harassing this one girl and wanting to go out with her. I've talked about this before. I talked about this in my Tombs video, but whenever Junji Ito draws someone as ugly, 99% of the time, they are evil. That's just how it goes. He's a very black and white kind of guy. So many of these stories revolve around people being ugly. It's kind of messed up, actually. But also, now that I think about it, I feel like there are a lot of stories that Junji Ito has written where it's just like, oh yeah, they were ugly. It's like that fashion model one. It's like the horror to it is that like she's a monster and she like has spiked teeth and like eats people or whatever. But the real horror to it is that she's ugly. And it's like, wow, this is really deep, Junji Ito. Thank you for sharing and instilling a fear of ugly people into me. If he draws someone as pretty and nice looking, about 80% of the time they're good, and the other 20% of the time they're evil. But whenever he draws someone who looks disgusting, they are almost always evil. And so there's this very fat, disgusting, dirty guy who goes, so you didn't answer when I asked you before, will you go out with me? It was love at first sight. I can't get you out of my mind, I want you. I don't know why I'm doing the YouTuber voice, but I am. I already told you no. Who would go out with a foul, disgusting man like you? Don't you ever ambush me again. And so this girl is one of the 2 daughters of a woman who believes in cleanliness above all else. Really, she just seems like a Karen, and she just demands everything is perfectly clean, and she kind of makes their housekeeper clean everything repeatedly because it's dirty, even though it's clean. And they have a plumbing issue, and so the woman calls up a plumber, and the plumber comes in, and he's a plumber, and so he's been messing with dirty pipes, and so he's kind of dirty. And she just keeps on yelling at him, and she goes, you've spilled that filthy water. And then the guy thinks to himself, would you shut up already? And I actually really love this collection because it has some of the most human Junji Ito characters. Like, they have the same thoughts that I am a reader am having. And so I really appreciate that because of the fact that it just makes the people seem all the more natural. And it turns out that the woman is estranged from her husband, who is the father of the 2 daughters, and he wants to get coffee with them, and they just kind of don't want anything to do with him. Then you remember the fat, ugly, disgusting man from the beginning? Well, the sister of the main girl invites this guy to their home, and then the mom sees him and then starts throwing eggs at him, which I think is really funny. Hey, you filthy boy, what are you doing loitering in front of my house? You'll make the house dirty. Get out of here. What? Rena's mother asked me to come over. Get her mother out here. I am her mother, and I would never invite a boy like you to this house. Quit whining and go. And she's throwing eggs at him, and he's not even in their house. He's just kind of in the front street outside of it. Here, mom, eggs. And she just keeps on chucking eggs at him, and he's just standing there and taking it. I think in America, this would be considered assault, especially because of the fact that the boy was doing nothing weird. He was literally just outside of their house in what was presumably a public space, so I don't think he did anything wrong. Later on that night, when everyone's asleep, a burglar seems to come into the house of the woman and the 2 girls. The mother then proceeds to beat the burglar to death, only it's revealed that the burglar was the girl's father who wanted to see them. The girls then lie to the police and say that the mom killed the father in self-defense, even though it wasn't really. They say that he had a knife and he was planning on killing the girls and the mom, but of course that's not what happened. He just wanted to see his daughters. And so at this point, the spirit of the dad gets stuck in the drains of the girl's house, and the pipes in the drains just make weird sounds. They go grrr, 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 grrr. And so that's the titular moan of the story collection. That's not My Cousin Boy Whimpering to Deftones at all. And so the pipes keep on making weird sounds, and then one of the girls sees something in the drain in the shower, and she reaches her arm down there, and it starts pulling her in, and the dark-haired sister doesn't believe her, and so the light-haired sister gets pulled completely down into the drain, at which point it's revealed that the fat, ugly boy who got eggs thrown at him is in the drain, meaning that the father's spirit and the fat, ugly boy are also both in the drain together, and so they're just harassing and haunting the people of this house. And it turns out that the fat, ugly, dirty boy is drinking all the water that goes down the drain, which is kind of funny. But I really like this story because it's kind of absurd and silly. And also the imagery of someone just being pulled down into the drain is really solid, I think. I think it's a really good image. And so the story, in typical Junji Ito fashion, just ends without a clear resolution. But I really like this story because it's kind of weird, it's kind of funny, but all in all, it just kept me entertained. So I think it's a really solid one. Next up, we have Blood Orb Grove, which is probably my favorite story in the collection. There's a couple who's driving on a road, at which point some blood lands on their windshield, and then the guy driving crashes the car. They get out to search for help, and then they find 4 boys. The boys follow the couple, and they end up attacking the couple, and they suck the blood of the woman. So then the 2 of them walk away from the kids, and they run into this weird abandoned town, and they find a puddle of blood on the ground, and then they find a trail leading away from the puddle. And the guy goes, "Look, there's a trail. We're going to see how far it goes." And then the girl says, "Hey, let's not." Which I think is one of the smartest lines uttered by any Junji Ito character ever. I don't really understand the fascination that people have with seeing something horrific and then wanting to follow it and see what it leads to. I mean, I get it. I get that it's curiosity, but curiosity killed the cat. And so all that I'm saying is that more people would survive in horror movies and stuff if they just were like, hey, I see something horrible, I'm not going to go after it. Instead, I'm going to retreat and call the police, and maybe they can investigate since they have weapons. Then they find a blood trail that leads to the door of a young man. The young homeowner looks at this couple and he says that the woman reminds him of a woman that he used to know. And he tells the story of a lost love. It's a tragic and curious tale. She was a lonely woman. She was always saying, "Everyone avoids me. They get fed up with me and leave. You'll be sick of me too soon enough. You'll stop wanting to see me." I would argue that people weren't avoiding her. She was avoiding them. That's why you're so lonely, I'd say. She would sit and listen, but she kept on saying it nonetheless. One day I spotted a scar on her wrist. When she noticed me looking, she said, "You see, I try to set my blood free. After all, my blood wants out of my body. It's sick of me." I realized it one night. It was a nosebleed. When my nose started to bleed, It's funny, you know. It was like, even my blood wants to get away from me. I felt the need to keep a constant eye on her. The thing I feared happened surprisingly soon. "Darling," he says upon finding her on the bathroom floor, "stop this foolishness. Leave me alone, I'm setting my blood free." Thankfully, the cut on her neck was shallow. I found her at the hesitation mark stage. I was desperate. And so he starts sucking her blood, as you do whenever you see someone bleeding. Of course, like a normal person. "Please don't try to take your life again. I love you. And I love you." But unfortunately and strangely, her blood really was trying to escape her. I saw it in her dark apartment. Branches were growing out of her neck, right in the place where she'd cut herself with a razor blade, and there were round fruits at the ends of them. My blood's begun the big move. Soon it will all be gone from my body and I'll be empty. And then one morning he goes into her apartment and then there are just these branches of blood fruit sticking out from her neck. And I just have to say, this is a very striking image, I think. The idea of someone's blood literally fleeing from them and striving to get out and taking on the form of fruit, I really love. I think it's really creative. And so the couple stay the night at the homeowner's house, and then the man from the couple gets up and he sees the homeowner drinking the blood of his girlfriend, and he just kind of walks away and goes, "Am I still asleep?" Which, of course, if you see someone drinking the blood of your lover, that's what you have to do. And so then he follows them and he follows the trail of blood that initially led them to this house. And he finds a room full of blood fruit. And basically this is where you find out what happened. Long story short, the man is a kind of vampire. And the reason why the village is deserted and why he's the only one in the area, along with the kids, is that basically he cut everyone and then drank from them, and then it turned them into blood fruit, and so they just live in his house and it's his blood fruit room and he just drinks blood. And the reason why the kids are there, the 4 kids who attacked the man and the woman earlier, is because they're a sort of vampire also who want to drink the blood fruit. And if one of these vampires drinks from your blood, then you begin to spawn blood fruit and there's no reversing it. And so the man's able to get his girlfriend and she's already sprouting the blood fruit from her neck where the young homeowner drank from her blood. And at this point, the 4 kids who attacked the couple earlier burst into the house of the homeowner, because these are the children of the villagers who did not make it, who were turned into blood fruit. And so the kids immediately start drinking the blood of their parents and their family members. And at this point, the homeowner sticks a pitchfork through one of the kids, which was a really brutal image I wasn't expecting. And I think that's part of why I enjoyed this collection so much, is because a story like this really shocked me. And I was like, wow, this is really gross for Junji Ito. Like, this is really kind of violent and gory, and he's always sort of done that stuff, but for some reason it affected me more in the story. And so the story ends with the young couple escaping, but both of them are having the blood fruit come out of them now, and then the young woman starts eating the blood fruit, meaning that she will be turned into a vampire. And I enjoyed this story a lot because I thought it was a really creative take on vampires. I freaking love vampires and I think they're awesome, and I thought this was just a really cool take on the entire vampire mythos, just the idea that they don't want blood specifically, they want the blood fruit that comes out of people. And yeah, I just thought it had a lot of disgusting imagery, and I just enjoyed the story a lot. This is certainly my favorite story from Junji Ito that I've read in quite some time. Next up, we have the 4th story, Flesh-Colored Mystery, which is another kind of questionable title, I guess I'll say, for a short story. You have Moan, and then you have Flesh-Colored Mystery. I don't know. Flesh-Colored Mystery has a really simple concept, but has a really good execution. The concept is basically there's a woman who thinks that just being flesh, being skinless, is the most beautiful form that you can be, and so she does it to herself and she does it to her sister, and they are trying to do it to her child. And the child looks like a horrible little alien monster, and he attacks the other kids, but also he's being abused at home because he's being subjected to this skin removal ritual, and so he just looks really gross and he's hairless. But what's happening is that the mother of the child and her sister are doing this ritual to this young boy, but the sister doesn't want the boy to have his skin removed, and so as a result, she's doing the mixture for the skin removal, only she's adding in an extra component that's screwing it up. And so the mom and the aunt who remove their skin, can slip it on and wear it like clothes. But what ends up happening basically is the teacher who's teaching the son who's being subjected to these rituals, basically she ends up at his house and the boy ends up destroying the skin of his mother, meaning that she cannot go back into her skin, meaning she's just a flesh monster and she will die. And I really liked this story a lot because I thought there was a lot of disgusting imagery involving slipping in and out of your skin. And you see skin melting and you see people's faces being ripped off, and it reminds me of Death of the Family, the Batman story wherein the Joker wears his face like a mask. And so I think, like the previous story, like the vampire one, the reason this story works for me is because it has a lot of just really gross pictures. And that reminds me of a Stephen King quote where he says that if he can't scare you, if he can't creep you out, then what he'll try to do is gross you out. And I think that's why this story works for me, basically, is because of the fact that it doesn't really scare me, it doesn't creep me out, but it does gross me out. Whenever you're writing horror, any kind of horror, you just want to affect the reader in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's probably true of any kind of writing. Sometimes you want people to cry, sometimes you want them to be scared, but in horror, if you can't succeed at that, then you just want them to feel something. And so while they're not perfect and while they aren't exactly high literature, I still think a lot of the stories work in this collection just because of that, because they made me feel something. Then we have two very short stories at the end of this collection, Near Miss and Under the Ground, and we'll just talk about them together because they're that short. Near Miss is about an airplane that goes missing, and the people looking for this mystery aircraft are flying in the same space that it was before it went missing, and then they see the aircraft appear. And they see that the airplane is on fire and it's covered in holes, and then they see all the passengers on the aircraft still just kind of numb. It's revealed afterwards that at the time that they saw the aircraft had already been found crashed with everyone on board dead, and so it's kind of implied that they saw a spirit form of the aircraft. Essentially, they just saw a ghost plane and everyone on it as a ghost. And I thought it was a really brief short story, but I thought it worked because of the fact it was so short. It's only like 10 pages or something. And then the final story, Under the Ground, is about a reunion, a high school reunion. Basically, the high school class made a time capsule and they buried it in the ground like 20 years earlier. And two girls talk about how there was one girl in their class who was weird, who no one was friends with. And one of these girls recounts that she still heard from the weird girl and that they talked on the phone sometimes. And then it turns out that that girl was buried alive in that capsule. And so whenever they dig up the capsule, the girl is still there. And not only that, but the girl who was buried alive is found with a telephone, and there's just a question at the end. How did this girl telephone this other girl whenever she was buried alive? And so it's just kind of one of those stories where it's like, oh, that's kind of weird. And that story concludes Junji Ito's Moan. As I was saying earlier, I feel like Moan is a really solid short story collection. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and I think that it knows when to cut certain stories off. As always, I do think that some of the stories, a couple of them, like the flesh-colored mystery and then the vampire one, I would have been okay with them going on for another 10 or 15 pages. But at the same time, I think that what is there is still really good. I think it's really solid. And I would rank this as one of Junji Ito's best works. It's not on the same level as like Uzumaki or Amina, but I think it's up there. I think it's really good. I think it's certainly one of the best short story collections they've put out with them. And certainly the best one of the last like 5+. And again, a lot of that was just because of the gross out factor. A lot of it was just because certain points were disgusting. And so it just made me feel something as a reader. I would rather feel grossed out than feel bored. I think that's kind of what it boils down to. One thing I would recommend is that Smudge has been putting out these collections. They've been putting out a lot of older horror stuff. So I read Her Frankenstein a while back and I thought it was really strong. I started reading Mansect last night and I think it's really strong. So if you like Junji Ito, I would recommend that sort of stuff. I think it's pretty solid. But all in all, I really loved this collection. I thought it was really great. And so if you're interested, I would totally recommend checking it out. So thank you for watching. Have a nice night and goodbye.